Hi, I'm Marco Rubio, and I'm welcoming you this week to our latest installment of Constituent Mailbox. Every week we reach into our constituent mailbox, our emails and our letters, and we pick a couple or three that are typical of the kind of mail we're getting, and we answer them. So please send us your emails or your letters because we may pick you next week. And so let's get started. Our first letter is an email from Kenya, who's from Panama City, and she writes, Dear Mr. Rubio, my husband, a disabled Navy veteran who earned a bachelor's degree from Troy University, has struggled and failed to find employment for almost 3 years. His unemployment status has brought all kinds of problems to our family, our marriage, and our health. He has submitted over 1,000 applications in almost every state. However, he is either overqualified or doesn't have enough experience. At least that's what we're being told. I write to you today because I have faith that you can help us. I look forward to your reply and a solution to our problem. Please contact me at the above address or email if you would like to see his resume. Again, that's from Kenya, from Panama City. Well, Kenya, let me tell you, unfortunately, your story is way too typical. We hear that all over the country and all over the state. People that have done everything that's been asked of them. In your husband's case, he served our country, but he also has a degree. And we've told, what we've told people for generations in America is that if you work hard, you go to school, you get good grades, you graduate with a degree, you can make a decent living in this country and you'll be able to provide for your family. But over and over again, we're now hearing from parents whose children cannot find jobs, and we're hearing from families like yours. And you touch on something that's often lost when we talk about unemployment as a statistic. It's not just the loss of a job. It's the devastating psychological impact that it has on marriages and families and communities, and you're living that. So the number one issue facing America is the lack of jobs, the inability of hardworking people like your husband, well-qualified people, to find a job. And the reason is simple. The backbone of our economy isn't Wall Street, and it isn't government. The backbone of our economy is small businesses. Hardworking taxpayers who go out every day and start a business or grow an existing business, and when they do that, they create jobs and opportunity for people. These are the job creators, small businesses. And they're afraid to create jobs today in America because they think the worst is yet to come. They look at Washington and largely what they see is a bunch of what they think are irresponsible people, politicians running around making a lot of noise but not solving any problems. They look at our economy and they see a government that's over-regulating things, a tax code that they can't predict, a national debt that will mean higher taxes and higher interest rates, and they fear that the worst is yet to come, and so they're holding back on their ideas. Government is not the only reason why small business isn't growing, but it's a big reason why small business isn't growing. And it's one of the reasons why people like yourself and your husband are hurting, and we have to change that. It's one of the reasons why I ran for office, because I don't think Americans have forgotten how to create jobs. They just need a government that makes it easier for them to do that. And I hope I can be a part of that solution. Thank you for writing. Our second email comes from Kurt in St. Augustine. He writes, I am writing to express my extreme dissatisfaction with the state of current affairs in Washington. In politics, it is necessary to compromise. Extremist views on either end of the political spectrum are rightly moderated through the political process. However, as of late, the Republican Party seems unwilling to compromise to any extent, regardless of the effects to the country as a whole. I implore you to disregard your party's leadership and stake out a position for the common good before it's too late. Kurt, this is also a common complaint that I hear, and I want to clarify a little bit. Number one, I've actually taken on the leadership of my party. When I ran for the United States Senate, the leadership of my party did not support me. And I said over and over again that one of the reasons why I was running is because I believed both political parties are taking America in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, too much of that hasn't changed. One of the first things I found when I got here in Washington is that they like to play a lot of gimmicks and games. They'll tell you they're saving you a bunch of money in tax cuts or budget cuts, but in fact, they're not really cuts. Or they'll talk about bills that are supposed to be job creation bills, but they're not really job creation bills. So I agree we do need to compromise. Not on our principles, because I campaigned on my principles. I told people where I stood on these issues. And I can't break the trust that people have placed in me. I have to keep my campaign promises. But within the framework of that, there is room for compromise on ideas. And I'm willing to work with anybody who's serious about finding solutions to this problem. In fact, I am working right now, actively, with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to come up with a jobs plan that's a real jobs plan. Now look, there's some major issues out there that Republicans and Democrats are not going to agree on. And that's why we have elections. But there are some issues we do agree on. And for the life of me, I do not understand why we spend a lot of time here in Washington fighting over things that we agree on. So I say, let's identify the things we agree on and let's get them done. Let's show people that we are able to make progress. And I hope that in a few weeks, I'll have some really good news for you on that front. But I do share your frustration. Look, I'm proud to be a Republican. I think the Republican Party has the right ideas for America's future. But as much as I love being a Republican, I love my country more. And I am committed to doing anything I need to do from this job that you've given me the privilege of having to make sure that America, once again, is headed in the right direction. Our last email comes from Luis in Orlando. He writes, I'm a Latino teacher and Orlando resident, and I feel that your position, talking about me, is simply unacceptable for the following reasons. Number one, there is no state money for infrastructure, and I know this because there is $500 less towards every Florida student because of budget cuts, as well as 3% taken off teacher pay towards our pension. Number two, even though the president's last stimulus didn't reach its goals, it did improve the situation, and you can't argue that. Any improvement is what we need. I know this didn't pass through the Senate yet, but can you honestly give me a reason for you not to support the federal stimulus for police, firefighters, and teachers? I am an independent and I am able to see both sides, but I implore you to see the other side as well. Your ideas sound good for the long run when the economy has improved, but for now we definitely need the help from our federal government. Well, let me touch on the first one quickly, and that's the issue with state money for infrastructure. States are hurting. Florida's no exception. You need to understand Florida's money for education and infrastructure comes from sales tax collections for the most part. And sales tax collections are down. And the reason why sales tax collections are down in Florida are because people are spending less money. Sales tax is collected when you buy things. And if people are buying less, the government has less money. Why are people buying less? Because they don't have a job, because they're not making as much money as they used to, or because they're afraid of the future and they think tomorrow's going to be worse than today. They think next year's going to be worse than this year. And so when people don't have a job, or people are making less money, or they think the worst is yet to come, they get very cautious about their money and their spending. And that's why sales tax collections are down. You asked something very specific, number two, and it's about the federal stimulus for police, firefighters, and teachers. And you say something that you say that the original stimulus didn't improve the situation. Luis, I wish that were true, because if it were, I'd support it. I ran against the stimulus because I knew it didn't work and wouldn't work, and it hasn't. Here are some facts, and I brought them with you. When the president took office in January of 2009, there were 12 million people unemployed in America. He passed the stimulus, he passed the health care bill, he passed the financial reforms. For the first 2 years of his presidency, the president got everything he wanted from the Democratic Congress. There were 12 million people before, there are now 14 million people. After the president got everything he wanted, 2 million people more have lost their jobs. The unemployment rate, when he took over, was at 7.8%. After all these measures the president wanted were passed, it's now at 9.1%, a 17% climb. How about the federal debt? The federal debt was at $10.6 trillion when President Obama took office. After he got everything he wanted, including the stimulus, it's now at $14.9 trillion, an increase of 41%. On issue after issue, 32 million people on food stamps when President Obama took over. Now, 45 million people. Americans in poverty, there were 39 million Americans in poverty when the president took over. Today there are 46 million, a 6.4 million person increase in the poverty rate in America. What does that tell us? It tells us the stimulus didn't work. In fact, it set us back. And now the president's coming to us with a so-called jobs plan and saying, let's do more of the stuff that failed. I can't support that. I wouldn't support that if it came from Republicans. Here's what I will support, a real jobs plan, and I'm working on one. In fact, maybe as early as next week, we're looking forward to announcing a bipartisan jobs plan that won't cure all of our problems, but will do exactly what you talked about, and that is begin to make some progress towards solving the problem. And just as important, that will serve as a signal to you back home that here in Washington there are people that can work together, even if they disagree on a bunch of important issues. And so I hope next week we'll have an exciting announcement for you about a bipartisan bill we're working on to help move our economy forward. There are some things we disagree on with our Democratic colleagues, and we're going to have an election in 2012 where you, the people, will get to decide who's right on that. But what about the things we already agree on? Let's get those done, because you deserve that from your elected officials, and I'm working on being a part of a solution like that. Well, I want to thank all of you for your emails and your letters, and I ask you to continue to send them to us. They're really important. We read them. And from those letters, we get a real sense of what's on people's minds. So until next week, thank you so much for the privilege and the honor of representing you here in Washington, D.C. May God bless all of you, and may God bless the United States. Thank you.